Hello, I'm Aradhna Rana, founder principal of the Icon Public School in Ahmednagar. Today we are going to talk about teaching and learning. These are two processes which as educators we are very passionate about, and we are constantly looking for new methods, new tools to make teaching and learning most effective. I have been somehow a little critical about the methods of teaching we've been adopting, and today we are going to talk about a method which is very different to the method that we are using. But before we start that, let's look at what is learning. Learning is the process of acquiring a new understanding, new knowledge, new behavior, new skills, values, attitudes, and preferences. Now, the first thing that comes to your mind is why should we learn? Whether it is a student or whether I as an educator, the why of everything is very important. So why should we learn must be answered before we even we go to the first step of learning. Why do we need to learn? To improve our experiences, to make our lives better, and to probably get success in life. And how does learning take place? Learning takes place in two forms. One is formal education. We as educators, we formally educate the learners. And one is an informal learning which takes place from our environment by observing or by experiencing. So that is informal learning taking place. And is our learning relevant? We're going to talk about that. And are we learning right? That is what concerns me the most. Are we learning right? So this is the state of our traditional classrooms. The teacher is in front, is teaching. The students are passive listeners, sometimes active, but they are receivers. The teacher is the giver. So these are two roles which we observe in classrooms. So our traditional classrooms look something like this. I'm sure you're very familiar with the site. Now, my main objection to this kind of classroom is that we kill that why in students, because one, we expect a lot of discipline. So a lot of questioning is not encouraged, even if it is in modern methods of teaching. We are encouraging a lot of questioning, but how many times do we answer the question why? So it is we are basically involved in giving out knowledge. So I am somehow very concerned about the fact that gradually we kill that why in a child, which is, I think, the basis of learning. Unless you question, you don't learn. Now in school, what does a child feel? So much lecturing, one teacher comes and lectures, another comes. The child is in that position. He is hearing one, hearing the other. The teachers take turns, but the student looks something like this. When he goes home, there's so much homework. At home, all the time, the parents are complaining and the children are complaining. There's so much homework to do. And then the basic question comes, do you know how much I know? That means the child is questioning your way of assessment. Do you actually know what the children know? What are we assessing? We are assessing the knowledge that we have imparted to the children. Have the children been able to reproduce it in our assessment methods? How much a child has gained? How much he has absorbed? I don't know whether we really are assessing, that. So now my questions are we making learning relevant? To make learning relevant, the answer to why must be given to the students. When the students ask, why do I need to learn this? We must be able to give this answer to the students. Now, when you teach a typically algebra equation, uh, 2a plus 2b is equal to area. Now, is it relevant to his scheme of things? Is he going to apply it somewhere? If so, even if he is not going to apply it today, tomorrow, is it going to be the basis of learning that he will need tomorrow? If it is history, the student asks, why should I study history? What is the use of history in my life? A teacher must be able to explain to him and also make it relevant to him so that he knows that he is doing it for a purpose. Are we making learning effective? Learning will be effective if it is relevant. Effective means, is the student actually using that learning in something that he is doing with his life? Will learning contribute to life skills? Will it make a student's life easier or more successful in today or in the days to come? So these are the questions that we ask. Now, traditional learning methods were, the teacher goes to a class, introduces the content. So open lesson number 4. And then the teacher starts explaining the lesson. After that, the teacher gives guided practice. That means either, question answers, fill in the blanks. So all these kind of practice exercises are given. Maybe there'll be some group or independent work, some kind of, work will be introduced in the class. And then there is the homework where the student is expected to write what he has learned. So this is the traditional method of learning. And today we are going to talk about flip learning. Flip learning is absolutely opposite of what we've been doing. Now, why are we talking about it? We are talking about it because there's obviously something lacking in the method of learning that we have been following. So this whole concept of flip learning that has come into education has to have some reason for it to now be thought of as one of the ideal methods of teaching, which means there was something which was going wrong in our education system. We are trying to correct it. And correct how? By totally flipping the method of learning, which means the homework, which was the last thing, is now being given first. That means at home you get introduced to the lesson that you're going to learn. Now, what is learning? Learning always takes place in a very linked manner. For knowledge to be linked, there must be some kind of knowledge to which it gets attached. That is where learning becomes effective. With no background knowledge, it's very difficult to make learning effective in a classroom or outside it. Now, what are we doing by flipping the method is, the lecture that the teacher was giving in class or explaining the lesson in class goes home before the lesson is taught. The student gets familiar with the concept of the lesson. Now, the teacher is not really explaining, so it goes in the form of a video. A video can be professionally made video. It could be the teacher explaining the lesson. So it could be a video, it could be a reading activity. Suppose a lesson is to be taught, the students are told to read the lesson before the lesson is taught. Normally what we would do is we would teach the lesson, and for homework we'd say homework reading. Now the whole system is flipped. The teacher gives the lesson, you read it first. After that, depending on what you have read or what you have seen in the video, there is some group or independent work assigned, so that the concept that the student has gained through a video or through the lesson that he has read is incorporated in something that he will do in terms of either a practical training or by teamwork, preparing a presentation, or by group discussion, but some kind of activity which engages the student and makes him think about it deeply. The third is a guided practice. Now the guided practice may be done in the class, may be done at home, which means either a worksheet is given to assess how much a student has absorbed. So guided practice could be in terms of worksheets, in terms of quizzes, in terms of question answer by the teacher. So the guided practice has been relegated to third, and then comes the content learning. After he has done all that, there is enough background knowledge for him to know the content. So there are many pluses and minuses about it, which we'll discuss. So what at this point what we are seeing is that what we were doing in a traditional method has turned topsy-turvy, and absolutely opposite of that we are doing, and that is why we call it a flip learning. Now, what are the stages in this flip learning? The first is viewing a lecture online. It could be, like I told you, in the form of a video which is professionally made, or in the form of a video where the teacher, the way she's teaching in the class, makes a video and sends it home. Now this concept before these times was a little alien, but now that we have got used to this online teaching and this format of teaching, it is, I think, very acceptable that the videos are being sent home in any case by the teachers. So making videos is an art the teachers have mastered. So it's a very easy thing to do now. So it could be in form of a video. It could be with or without a worksheet. If the concept is a little complicated, then you want the students to focus on a particular portion of the video or some portions of the video. You could probably give a guided worksheet so that the student knows what to look for in the video, or it could be a pre-reading activity and the student should know what to look for in the pre-reading activity. So a small worksheet can be given, may not be given, if you just want the student to get an idea of the concept that you're going to teach. The second portion is the discussion. Now discussion where? Discussion generally should be encouraged between the peer group, among the peer group. The peer group, all of them have read or seen the video. They're all familiar with the concept. A free-flowing discussion should be encouraged. And then, or a guided discussion in the class where the teacher is a moderator. A teacher is not teaching. A teacher just is a moderator for the discussion taking place in the class among the peer group. The third is a reflection. After you've discussed, to reflect on different points of view and different ideas coming across. If there are 30 students in a class, there will be at least 20 ideas. To reflect on them and to debate the ideas. The fourth is the application. Application is the experimentation where an idea can be applied, the concept can be applied. So it could be in terms of any kind of practical training with a hands-on activity, with a science lab or a math lab, any kind of practical activity. And the fifth is evaluation. Evaluation of what you have learned, whether you have been able to absorb it correctly or not. So this is where assessment methods come in. Now when you're introducing a topic, raising curiosity is a very important thing for children. Children by nature are very curious. If you notice, a small child, 2-3-year-old, you take the child outside, the child's finger is always like this. Why? What is that? What is that? Why is there? 101 questions. Most often mothers get a little fed up and shut up the child, which is I think the worst thing you can do is to kill that why in a child. So patiently answer the questions. As a child grows up, the curiosity of finding out, discovering on his own is the biggest joy, because the joy of discovery, it's every learning process becomes a wow moment. Every time a child discovers something, the feeling of accomplishment in a child comes, that the child feels that he or she has discovered something on his own. Whereas when the teacher was teaching, It is just receiving. The child is not involved in that activity. That is why you will find in classrooms a lot of distracted children. Nothing in it for them. One, the child does not realize why he's doing it. He can't figure out why he learns to learn what he's learning. Secondly, there is nothing for him to do, so the receiving part becomes a little boring, and that is why the children get distracted. So when you introduce a topic, it's very important that certain things are left unsaid, left undiscovered, for the child to discover it himself or herself. Peer discussion leads to a lot of learning because children enjoy being in the peer group. They want to be either with them or one up on them. In both circumstances, learning takes place. When they discuss with the peer group, the kind of thought process that goes in will never come with a teacher response to a teacher or an adult. So there can be a lot of brainstorming with a peer group. Then reflecting in class. Reflecting in class again amongst the peer group, but with the involvement of the teacher. The teacher guides them towards reflection, what to look for, what are the kind of things they should be reflecting upon, but it should be restricted with the peer group, with the class, so that they interact with each other. Doing things together, whether it is with the peer group or with the teacher, is a joy that is unparalleled for children. Their involvement in doing things is something that gives them a lot of excitement. So that is another thing that in classrooms we need to do. Observation and deduction, not only in science but in any other subject where it can be done, is very important, because when a child observes, it is different perspectives of a problem that he is observing. He understands it many angles to it. It is not something like a one-dimensional knowledge that you're imparting to the child. And after observing, the role of the teacher is to encourage the students to deduce lessons out of it, whether it's a science lesson or a history lesson or formulas of maths or even English, whether it is imaginative or creative writing. These kind of skills have to be developed with the children. And hands-off learning, there is no substitute for hands-on learning. Whatever you do, you remember forever. Whatever you study, you may not. So once you have experienced it, and more than one of your senses is involved in it, in a classroom, it's only the ears that are involved. The eyes may or may not be on the teacher, and then none of the other senses are involved. Whereas in hands-on learning, almost 4 to 5 senses are involved, and that is why students learn much better. Now, what is the role of the classroom in flipped learning? And flipped learning is absolutely not restricted to any age group. Flipped learning can start from as young as primary children. Only the level of difficulty becomes more as they grow up. Now, for very young learners, even activities like show and tell, prop talk are very good activities to start with flip learning. So it's not that a teacher does not tell them or impart knowledge to them. They just have to pick up anything and talk about it. Their imagination grows, their ability to visualize grows, their perspective grows. So for small children, activities like small show and tell, storytelling, again a very important activity for young learners. Probably telling them a story and leaving it halfway, or giving them a video to watch. Now when you give a video to watch, you will see that children think of the story on different lines. And story need not be traditional stories or narrating stories. Stories may be just simple concepts or spinning stories. where the environment of the child is involved, where the child recognizes that there is something of him in this story. That is where children learn deductions. So pre-learning material could be these kind of inputs for a young learner. For the middle school children, the pre-learning activities could be quizzes, could be worksheets, could be helping students find relevance in learning by experimentation. So even small experiments to be conducted at home, and then translating it into practical life. When they come to class, translating these concepts that they have in their own mind formed by pre-learning material and turning them into something sensible which they can use in their practical life is the essence of learning. For senior school children, discussions and debates are very, very important for them to know that life is not black and white. Ideas are not black and white. There are many things which can be thought of from different angles by different people. That is where they learn how to accept ideas from other people. Innovation and creativity must be rewarded so that children know that they do not have to duplicate or replicate things. They can come up with new ideas and be appreciated for them. Developing a scientific attitude is very important in children. Scientific attitude does not pertain to science alone. A scientific attitude is logical, reasoning, critical thinking. These kind of skills, when developed in children, stand them in good stead in later life. And it is not that in flip learning everything happens at home. The role of classroom is very, very important even in flip learning. But classrooms look a little different. Like when you saw the first slide, traditional classrooms look like those, and the flipped classrooms look like these. This is where children have come armed with knowledge. Some concepts that they have formed may be wrong, doesn't matter, but there's some concepts that they have formed with their pre-learning materials. And the role of the teacher is not in front of the class. The role of the teacher is with the children, listening to them, guiding them, providing a roadmap for them to think the way they should to develop concepts and not do any kind of rote learning. Then when you take on a flip learning attitude in class, the teacher gets a lot of free time to review lessons. The teacher is not bound by finishing the syllabus as to teaching in a class. So reviewing is very important by the teacher, and reviewing does not mean only paper and pen tests or other kind of assessment. It could be just the way the students are grasping a concept. Wherever they find any roadblock, the teacher should be there to hold hands. In a flipped classroom, the way the classroom is arranged is also different. The teacher is not in front of the class. The students are in front of the class. A student who has understood a concept better can come in front of the class and explain the concept to the rest of the class. Peer pressure of participation really works, because it's very difficult for a child to come to class and be faced with a situation where he has either nothing to say, or he has not read the pre-reading material or not watched the video. So the other children are explaining in class. He does not get that feeling of importance of being in front of the class. So this is what drives children to watch that video, to do the pre-learning, to probably explore much more than other students, so that he can be one up on class when he comes to explain it. And students show up in class with a base understanding, so that it's easy for the teacher to mold concepts and guide them towards higher thinking. Students teach students. when a student is teaching a student, one, they understand their peer language much better. They at that the same age group, they can probably explain much better, because sometimes you have teachers who are highly educated, they're very, very knowledgeable, but they find it very difficult to come to the level of the students. So with this, the student is explaining the student another student. Now, a flipped learning classroom is student-centric. It is not, it's learning-centric, it is student-centric. The teacher's role is like a mentor, like a guide. So a lot of self-learning takes place. And this is one attitude we must develop in our children. When you see your classrooms, you will notice that students almost study as if they were doing you a favor or the parents a favor, because they don't realize that it's for them. They don't know why they are doing all this and what is the benefit of this learning for them. So that is why self-learning responsibility in students must be encouraged, whereas they learn for themselves. The sense of achievement that they get from this kind of learning is tremendous, and that drives them to self-learn. So, it is like a cog wheel. You start at once and then the wheel moves. Innovation occurs because, they're learning themselves. They are probably, stumbling a little. And when they stumble a little, there is a problem. They learn to solve the problem. And that is where innovation occurs. High order thinking is problem solving. Problems only occur when you do something. So that is where the flipped learning becomes very effective. If you do it yourself, if you explain it to others or yourself, this is where you will face problems. And this is where you will find solution to problems. So it is all problem-based learning. You get to the problems and then you solve them. Some of the apps that you can use for flipped learning are Jingfree, Snagit, Camtasia and QuickTime. These are only some of them, not at all restrictive. Many, many more. Now, while students are self-learning, while they are exploring, they will go on to technology. When they go on to technology, looking for one particular aspect of one particular subject, they will see so much more. And when this whole table laid of knowledge is placed in front of them, the child is bound to be interested in something and pick up some. So that is where our hope lies, that children will get interested in learning and will develop that thirst to learn, because they will come across many exciting ideas. This is like, flipped learning is now happening with the teachers also. If you notice, before COVID times, very few teachers were tech savvy. Now, because they are forced to, they are going to technology. While they are going to technology, now they are discovering exciting ideas, because when a teacher is looking for a particular app, Google offers 4 more. Pop-ups come. Then they want to try out these apps. Once they try out these apps and they're successful, that leads them to try out more. It's the same procedure for the children. When children get interested in these procedures, they will try out even more. Now, when you have the learning content and you are going through this learning content, group activities and collaboration is something that becomes a very effective way of teaching, because teamwork, in a sense, is the biggest life skill that you can give to a child. When we live in society, if we know how to work in society, if we know how to work in a team, to lead a team, to follow in a team, life becomes so much more easy, and success comes from that in later life. Project-based learning. Project-based learning is learning by doing. So obviously, when you are, you must have seen that children are actually more, excited in labs than they are in classrooms. Even those small experiments they conduct, they look forward to it. sports. They are doing something. They are not sitting and just receiving. So they're very excited about sports. They're very excited about art because it is they who are doing something. So if you notice this whole pattern, children want to be doing activities where they discover, and this is the essence of learning. Now again, another thing of flip learning is peer review. You are going to be judged by your peer group as to how much you have been able to grasp. So this high of doing well in your peer group drives a child to achieve. And the biggest thing about flip learning is that a child can move at his or her own pace. In a classroom of 30 or 40, when the teacher is in a hurry to finish a particular portion, there are 10 children who are exceptionally good. They make the teacher's day. So the teacher gets very excited about these 10. There are 10 the teacher derives satisfaction from because they are improving, and if a teacher is good, they will come up from the average to good. So the teacher is excited about those children also. The last 10 who do not provide, the teacher probably feels that it's too much of work for them, for her to bring them up, and they do not show measurable results. So these are the children who get left behind. And why are they like that? Because probably they cannot understand in the time frame that the teacher is teaching. Now when you give learning material at home, what you are doing is giving the child his own space. The child is not pressurized into learning it in those 10 minutes that the teacher is teaching. If he feels that he is not understood, he can rewind a video, see it again, see it when he is prepared to learn. So there's a lot of flexibility for the child. That makes learning enjoyable. A lot of teachers do feel that if you give things at home, children don't see, and they come to class blank. How long? When the child comes to class blank and realizes that the students who have seen the video or have read the pre-reading material, they're having a very good time in class because they are the leaders. They are explaining to the other children, and they are the ones who will be sent out in breakout rooms to discuss, and he's the one who's going to be stuck with the teacher. That is what will drive him to master the content and be one of those who come and teach the next day. So that this is very important, that the child learns at his own pace. There is no pressure. Now for the flip learning method, 4 things are very, very essential. One is a flexible learning environment where the timeline of students is flexible. If a child has not been able to grasp, he can go back and do it again. So and if you have a very rigid learning environment, it's not going to work. The culture, the attitude of the class and the teacher has to be a learning culture. The academic discussion should be exciting for the teacher as well as the student. Then the content. Now the role of the teacher here is much, much more than the role of the teacher in a traditional classroom, because the teacher decides the content that a child will see, feel ignited enough and excited enough to come to class and either teach the children or review it or discuss it. So this content has to be carefully thought. The teacher has to be knowledgeable, has to be an expert at the subject to know how much and what to give. So the professional educator is a must. The type of content is a must. A professional educator is a must. So unless you have all these 4 things, flexibility, the learning culture, good content, and a professional educator, flip learning will not work. It will turn out into a film viewing kind of learning. A lot of misconceptions about flip learning. So what flip learning is and what it is not. 1, it is a valuable use of class time. It is not that you will learn at home and do nothing in class. It is taking away the rote or in slang what you would call donkey work out of the class. So it's not writing notes, writing, copying answers or anything like that. Class where the teacher is there is utilized in the most effective way in flipped learning. Then it is a way to personalize learning. In this method, the content is seen at home by everybody. Now when they come to class, the teacher knows whom to focus on. We'll just take it a little later on in a more detailed manner. And it is about increasing student contact time. Now the teacher in a class is not standing in front of the class with 30 students looking at her, some mentally sleeping and some physically. The teacher is with the students, with them, experimenting with them, guiding them. So the contact time is much more. Now what flipped learning is not, it is not about videos. A lot of people have this misconception. Flipped learning means you'll send a video home, the students will watch the video and your learning is finished. No, it is not about videos at all. It is about choosing the right content. Online learning does not replace a teacher. It is not that you can watch a video and not interact in class. It has no meaning, if you cannot put your concepts across to other people for reflection, or if you do not have enough of practical experience about it. And it is not about students working in isolation. It is not that student watches a movie at home and learns. No, it is about interacting on that, having group-based teamwork so that students learn together. Now flipped learning is not necessary that it has to happen at home. Your classroom can turn into a flipped classroom. Schools where you have more time, probably boarding schools, or schools where teachers are staying longer, because it takes time for the students to view the content. Now viewing can be done even in the classroom. It has its own advantages. The first thing is you give the same content, the children are viewing it, and this viewing is happening in the classroom, so teacher monitors whether the students are really viewing it or not. So it has its pluses. There is a app which is called Educanon, very useful in giving content for viewing. Now also in the classroom they are working at their own individual pace, so it becomes very effective. The hardware that you're giving them, which is whether you're giving them your laptops or any kind of hardware or content, it can be monitored, so it is safe. Interest is maintained because everybody is watching the same thing. So students, they're not watching it in isolation also, so they are probably more interested. And then the teacher, because she is there during this period also, can make the assessments alongside. She does not have to do it the next day. Now assessment does not mean written tests or anything. Assessment is how much a student has been able to grasp and how much more attention will he need. Now to create the flipped content, it is not only the videos. There are many more apps available, many more tools available. Some of them I have listed here for you. The PowerPoint is a very effective tool for sending home for pre-learning, because one, it is in form of slides, so it's very crisp. And secondly, even if you're showing it in a video, it has the annotation function, it has a recording function, so it's easier for teachers to make videos and explain to children on PowerPoint. And you can do a lot with PowerPoint. You can make the slides attractive, you can put in videos on PowerPoint, so it's a very effective tool. Another effective tool is Screencast-O-Matic, which is whatever you are doing is recorded from the screen. So like I'm doing this presentation for you, the teacher could be teaching like this, it all gets recorded, and the teacher does not have to repeat it, the same thing over sections. The same thing can be used. So you see, the teacher's effort in this becomes very effective. The teacher does it once, it is used across many sections. And year after year probably. If the teacher feels that it's so well made, probably year after year. So this effort, this time saved can be utilized in the class. The teacher can interact with students. The teacher can find innovative methods. So that is why flipped learning methods become much more effective. edTED.com, it creates YouTube videos, and Meta.io, it creates it's a digital storytelling tool, and of course there are many more. So I've just shortlisted a few for you, and these tools can be used. Now, nothing is absolutely positive. There's nothing which is ideal. So flipped learning has its own challenges. What we have to weigh is the pros and cons. If you think that this method is going to be more effective, it has more advantages than disadvantages, then we adopt it. If you feel that the disadvantages are too many, you cannot, then we probably go on with the traditional methods and find something else. Now, the first challenge of this method is that it's come into a lot of criticism, that there's a lot of screen time. Let me tell you, research has proved that the screen time is not detrimental to health. Over a long time also, you see, otherwise there are thousands of people who sit on the computer the whole day, IT professionals. In any case, these children are preparing for a life like that. So it is not that you're saving them from screen time and they will not use it. The children or the youth of today is almost addicted to screen time. If it's not going to be this, it's going to be something else. Second is technology glitches, which is a serious problem, especially in India, because technology has not progressed so much in rural areas or in areas where there's no connectivity, and gradually probably it'll mend itself. But at present, yes, technology glitches are there. However, flipped learning is not dependent only on technology. You have the world at your feet to develop innovative methods. It could be a TV program that you have watched. You can, probably tell the children to watch that program. The government is coming up with a lot of educational channels. So the teacher could, tell the children to watch a particular episode on a subject. So it just depends on the teacher how innovative she can be. But yes, technology glitches are there. Thirdly, it needs a lot of smart teachers. It cannot be done by a traditional teacher who's not willing to change. It has to be done by a teacher who knows much more than she would know as an ordinary traditional teacher. Because when you are teaching in the classroom, you have to go and teach in a classroom, you are armed with knowledge of the portion that you're going to teach, and you go teach and you come back. Whereas in a flipped classroom, the student has studied. You don't know whether some smart students have gone beyond their area of work and studied more. So there'll be a lot of questions, especially from the smart students. There are going to be a lot of questions. The teacher has to be armed with the answers, which means the teacher has to be much more knowledgeable and smart. The quality of content. It is not that you have to be very discerning about what content you want to send to your children in its effectiveness. Whether it will be effective or not. If it is a long drawn content and what the students are actually getting out of it is very little, the students might gradually get bored of watching your videos, may not watch at all. So to keep this whole class alive and interested, it's very important that the quality of content that you use is very appropriate and good. Sometimes you might find a fantastic video, but it is so long. Will the student have the patience to see this whole video? So you may be required to edit the video and send it in a form where the student will absorb. So it is not cut, copy, paste kind of work that a teacher does. Then you're going to have noisier classrooms. So that is, we are not used to it. We are used to telling our children, keep quiet, silence in class. Flipped classrooms are never silent because there has to be a lot of discussion, debate, a lot of exchange of ideas, so it has to be noisy. How the teacher controls a noisy classroom depends on her. So we have to develop the kind of methods and basically get the students so interested that the noise is because of the excitement to learn and not because of distraction from the class. And time consuming, yes and no. It's a challenge and it's time consuming if you let it be time consuming. If you see the effectiveness of the method, it is not time consuming because what the student absorbs, what the student remembers is in lesser time than in a traditional classroom. You probably on the face value of it, it seems time consuming because you take longer on a lesson. But you don't have to revise it as many times because the learning has cemented. So that is why I won't call time consuming a negative because it would turn out to be a positive. Now if you don't take care of all this, the flipped classrooms may turn out to be watch video, have conversation, watch another video. Then it's going to be a total flop and total failure. So this is where we have to be careful. How are assessments done in flipped classrooms? The assessments obviously are going to be flipped also. So the best assessment tool for a flipped classroom is quiz. A quiz has to be very intelligently designed. And the assessment is not in terms of marks or about how much a student has learned, passing a student or failing a student. The assessment is for the teacher to know which are the students who need her care. So now when you assess the first 30% of the students who have really absorbed it, they are going to get bored when you explain it to the others. So the best is to send these 30% out in breakout rooms. It could be a class breakout room. It doesn't have to be a virtual breakout room. In a class, whether in a corner, to sit, discuss, come up with some innovative ideas. So this is the homogeneous lot of children who have got the concept. Now discussing a higher order. So one, they have been segregated because it's very rewarding for them to know that they're the first 30% and they are into high order thinking. Very exciting for children. So they will as I foresee, these are the children who will come up with a lot of ideas and will actually get into academic discussion. So you have this 30% off your hands, because this is the 30% which becomes a problem for the teacher in class, because this 30% have already done, they've understood, and then they get on to disturbing the class. So if you send this 30% into breakout rooms, not probably together, probably in smaller groups, the next 30% will get your assistance. That means whatever you just you guide them to come up with answers. The last 40% is the teacher's focus. If they have not been able to get it because of repeated viewing of the pre-learning material, if they've not been able to get the concept, this is where your guided learning will take place, your focus will take place. So assessment is not to grade but to give the teacher an indicator on how to differentiate his or her instruction. Now assessment tools. There are a list of assessment tools, but this is just the tip. I am giving you just a little bit of assessment tools that you can use. There are many more. You can find your own, Google and all these platforms are full of it. So some of them are these which I have listed out for you, and a lot of teachers are using this also. For different subjects, you have different assessment tools. The problem sometimes teachers face is in the subjective assessment. Objective assessment, there are many more tools. Subjective assessments, there are fewer tools and the teacher has to step in. So the traditional method of assessing, whether exams or whatever, probably could be held once or twice a year to get an overall view of what the children are getting. But overall, when we switch to flipped class, switch is also not that 100% classrooms become flipped classrooms and we just forget about traditional methods, but the percentage of flipping a classroom will become more and more. Now, what does a flipped classroom do for a student is, this is a preparation for university life. University is actually this. There are no teachers who are going to teach in the traditional method and the students are going to wait for the teacher to ask for the homework or assessment. It is a lot of self-learning, a lot of self-discovery. So this is how students get trained to university life. Gradually, if you see, it's going to take over the world, and I hope that we can at least start off with probably even 10% of our classrooms becoming flipped classrooms, and try out these methods, experiment with them. It is not an overnight change that you will see. It will come gradually, and we just hope that we are able to excite students and get learning to be more effective and relevant. So thank you very much. I've enjoyed the session. I hope you have. And do try it out and get back to me on either WhatsApp or probably my mail address, and just tell me what your experiences. A lot of exchange of ideas can take place, and then let's see what happens.